So this is a subject is very, very front and center to all of us, whether it's professional or even in our personal lives, having to do with automation and AI. And so we wanted to bring a discussion on how to driving automation strategy to unlock tech talent potential. And so that's what we're going to cover. And we're very, very excited about some of the experts that we're able to bring into the discussion today. Now, what I'd like to do is introduce a very special panel of experts that we have for us today to address this topic. And so the first person I'd like to introduce is Bob Gasser, who is the Vice Chairman and Customer Relation Manager at Revuture, our sponsor of this. So Bob, give us a sense of your role in the company and more importantly, your background.
Yeah, thank you, Stephen. Bob Gasser. I joined Revuture 4 years ago after 32 years in financial services and grew up on the trading side, believe it or not, at JP Morgan. Went from there to 2 public companies to be their CEO with a span of about 12 years. Spent some time at McKinsey. And most recently, I was at Barclays and tasked with one of the things I was tasked with was a talent strategy for technology and worked with both our talent acquisition folks there and our contingent workforce folks. And that was my introduction to Revuture. I was introduced to Revuture as a client. And fell in love with the mission, what we do, how we change people's lives, sometimes generationally, and that's what brings me here today. So thank you.
Okay, fantastic, Bob. Thank you. Bill Hincher, Director of Banking and Financial Services Industry at UiPath. Tell us a little bit about what you do and your background.
Yeah, thanks, Stephen. So Bill Hincher, nice to meet everybody today. I lead our banking and financial services industry practice at UiPath, and I've been doing this for a number of years now after about 15 years in financial services prior to that. And really my role at UiPath is to help our clients understand how the technology can be used in their day to day to address, the significant problems that the business is facing. So it's really about the application of technology and how we tie that to their business initiatives. So that's really my role, is to kind of bring that to life and to share that art of the possible for our clients.
Okay. Thank you, Bill. And then I think the star of our panel is actually our customer panelist, Paul Vigilante, Managing Director, Head of Accounting and Investor Solutions Operations at BNY Mellon. Paul, why don't you give us a sense of your role and your background?
Hi, Stephen, and thank you. And as humbly as possible, being the star, I'll introduce myself. Paul Vigilante, Bank of New York Mellon, just actually my second year anniversary in head of accounting and investor solutions, which is our terminology for transfer agency, our transfer agency business. And a data point that will become more apparent as we go through our presentation. I am responsible for 8,000 employees here. The entire Bank of New York Mellon is 52,000. So I'm roughly 15% of the headcount of Bank of New York Mellon. Previous to Bank of New York Mellon, I had 15 years at JP Morgan, 10 years at Goldman Sachs, and 2.5 years at Citadel. And I'm looking forward to sharing some of my insights around this.
Yeah, thank you, Paul. And it's great to be with you and being able to get some visibility on this journey that you're on behalf of the BYN Mellon. Okay, so let's just talk initially about some of the workforce transformation trends that we see going on out there, because it is some of these trends and opportunities that are driving people to do things and make a greater impact on what their workforce can bring for their organizations. The first two obvious ones are this remote work, this being able to work anywhere and almost any time. That's still very prevalent, even though the jury may be still out on where exactly that ends up landing. And there's also the great resignation that continues, at least, for instance, with 10,000 baby boomers hitting retirement age per day till at least another 7 or so years till 2030. So this is happening while we're always trying to improve. There's this interesting thing. I thought it was quiet quitting, or I forget how they were describing it. Well, this quiet hire with in-demand talent that I'm also seeing out there. And what it is that it could be a number of things. One of them is investing in career upskill development that we see. Having folks be able to, they might be in finance, but maybe with some skills, they end up being managing the contingent workforce program. So some movement in really enhancing the career development with some upskilling to let people do that. And of course, what we're going to really key on is leveraging automation and AI. And so we'll get into more details of what that means for workforce transformation. And there are even some staffing companies out there now that not only they have human workers that they offer as part of their service, they're offering digital workers. And so we're going to be actually really focusing on what those digital workers might look like. And then finally, the two other trends we wanted to share here was leveraging contingent workforce resources themselves. When I began here some 11, 12 years ago, the total the percentage of a total workforce for large organizations, 1,000 more of FTEs, was around 13, 14%. But that has grown in the past year to be 25%, and now it's accelerating. And if you look at individual companies, say in the IT innovation vertical or the oil patch, we see organizations telling us individually that they're now at 65% of their total workforce are some type of contingent worker. So that is very transformative. And all of this means we're going to need some new workforce resource and culture management requirements and strategies that we're going to have to put in place. So we have a lot. I mean, I could have had another 5 slides on this, but we thought these were the ones that are going to be relevant to our discussion here. And so what I'd like to do at this particular point is I'd like to have Bill talk to us about this automation that's going on that people actually are leveraging maybe to impact their workforce transformation. I meant,
absolutely.
Did I say Bob? I meant Bill.
No problem. Yeah, no, and absolutely. And I think it's a great place to start because when people hear automation, I think their minds immediately have this preconceived notion in their minds, right? In their thoughts. And they kind of think about, I'm going to lose my job. And, you know, I think the reality is when we deal with a lot of clients, especially in financial services, is that there's a very stark difference in terms of what automation is doing today and what it's going to do in the future. And if you look at automation today and kind of where it's been the last couple of years, that's really that first pillar on the screen. And you know, this is the obvious area where people think about for automation. And this is the ability to really take that work that somebody's doing today and move it over to a digital workforce so that they don't have to actually do the mundane and monotonous work. Things like reconciliation, you know, processing large batches of data behind the scenes. This is all better suited for automation behind the scenes for robots to do so that employees can focus on more value-added tasks, right? So that's kind of where automation's been at for a number of years. And I think this is the most obvious area that people think about when they hear the term automation. But when you look at the UiPath platform in particular, what we also enable are additional avenues of automation. So if you look at the second pillar, this is really more of your digital assistant that helps the individual or the employee throughout their day-to-day. So what we do a lot of times with large banking and financial services organizations is in the contact center. And you think about a contact center agent who's handling a customer phone call. They're spending time on the line with that client. They're doing a lot of behind the scenes work, clicking their keyboard, obviously going to different applications. A lot of times, a lot of that work is better suited for a digital assistant working directly side by side with that contact center agent, right? So we're not necessarily removing the need for that individual to perform that task, but we're making them more productive in that task so that they can answer that call quicker, get to the next call. You know, we're all familiar with, you know, long wait times sometimes when we call a contact center. It's one of the least pleasant things that we can do, right? So that digital assistant capability is super important, especially in those client-facing type of roles. Beyond that, you know, you'll hear a lot in the market around low-code development, citizen development. There's a lot of opportunity for businesses to actually empower their employees to build and enable or to leverage these tools to build their own automations. You think about you're an individual in a bank, you do a lot of work in Microsoft Excel, building reports and sending them out. You know, that's a task that's really well suited for automation. And we enable you as a business user to build automation through citizen development as well. So there's a variety of different paths in which that process can take place. And then last but not least, our platform truly is an AI-enabled automation platform. And when we talk about AI, it's in very practical terms that allow you to do more automation within the organization. Automation is very rules-based traditionally, so you need to add intelligence to help us make sense of certain patterns, make sense of certain data that we want to ingest into an automated workflow, things like unstructured documents, think about a mortgage process or emails, for instance, that are coming into a client services desk. These are very difficult to automate with traditional technologies, and that's where we need some of that AI capability. And it's allowing our customers, by combining AI and automation, to be able to capture the benefits of automation even further.
Thank you, Bill. And I'm looking forward to some of my robot assistants to finally arrive here and what I do for SIA. These are all new concepts in the sense of citizen developer, robot assistants for those that are in particular roles. And I can see how that can get you even faster access to the data or the information you need to do your job. So that's it all seems to make logic and sense to me. But there is something interesting here to the citizen development idea that Bill's talking about. So, Bob, I think you've encapsulated this in talent enablement as a service. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah. So Reviture basically has two pillars to its business today. One is the what we call the hire, train, deploy function, which is fits very nicely with the contingent workforce management pieces that you've been talking about, Stephen. And then the other pillar is basically working on workforce transformation within the firm. So the upskilling element that you also alluded to in your slides. So just to give you an idea of the scale of what we do, we had 200,000 applicants to the firm last year. We accepted about 2% of that group and deployed them to our enterprise clients in a variety of different technologies, including UiPath. And so when you think about citizen developers, low-code development, it really has democratized the career paths for folks who may not have a software engineering background, but who have all the ability, motivation, grit, aptitude to perform very well in those jobs. And quite frankly, there's a tremendous amount to support the ongoing growth of automation and a variety of other enterprise technologies out there. We deployed 12,000 software engineers into enterprises throughout the country, and we have a very significant presence in the financial services space. We serve 7 of the top 10 banks today, and really the reason being that they're all going through massive digital transformation. So we provide a recruitment element, we provide a pre-training element, which really I think opens the aperture of our recruiting capability to folks that may not think of themselves as being job ready in the technology space. And then we have a training element that really is the secret sauce. And the training is, as you'll see in this case study with BNY Mellon, is very practical. It's not academic. It's focused on what does day one job readiness look like for a Reviture associate when they land within these teams, these technology teams. And then within the talent transformation space, which really is upskilling, we provide continuous enablement, and as I'm sure a lot of the firms that are represented in this call, there's a tremendous initiative within a lot of our clients to really focus on talent mobility. How do we, to Bill's point earlier, it's not about eliminating jobs, it's about upskilling folks to perform new functions that ultimately make the firm more efficient. So that's the journey I think that we followed in this particular circumstance, this particular case study, and it fit very nicely with all the elements of Reviture's capabilities. That's basically talent enablement as a service in a nutshell.
And Bob, let me ask you a quick question. Were you seeing talent enablement being deployed aggressively? Financial services, a couple of other verticals that come to mind?
Yeah, well, financial services, which would include insurance. We see it in the retail space, particularly on the e-commerce side of the house, where there's a lot of in-house capability, a lot of proprietary capability that the large retailers have built. We see it also in the telecom space. But I think those are the real drivers. It's really financial services, telecom, retail. They have been the most prolific. And when I say insurance, I mean health insurers, life insurers, auto insurers. The whole spectrum of insurance is actually ripe for what we're talking about here, right? In terms of automation of processes. So.
Okay. All right. So, Paul, tell us about what you're trying to achieve there by engaging talent engagement.
Sure. So what I'll try to do is bring together the practical application of what you just heard from Bill and Bob in my role here. So responsible for accounting and our transfer agency business, you have so much reliance on people. As I said, just for that business at Bank of New York Mellon, it's 8,000 people. We're cutting hundreds of thousands of NAVs a month, net asset value pricing a month. We're collecting data from all across the financial services and from custodians, from brokers, from sub-advisors. We bring it into our infrastructure and we corporate action, we value, we resolve reconciliation differences, and every single day we have to produce a net asset value for our funds, for our fund clients. And that just takes a tremendous amount of people. As much as we've invested in automation over the last 30 years that I've been doing this, it still, at the end of the day, requires that accounting oversight and that people aspect of the business. But what those people are doing has changed dramatically over that time frame. We all know that technology resources are scarce and expensive. So our strategy here is to take our operations talent and retool them, train them, develop them to become engineers. And that's what the operations professional of the future is. They're not, we don't want people who are doing reconciliations or managing corporate actions. We want people who are engineers looking at our processes and re-engineering those processes. And we're using AI to understand the data, understand our exceptions, understand those issues that we have to deal that drive our 12,000 manual processes. And then we need a solution around them, and that's where the UiPath in this particular instance becomes very relevant. I thought Bill's description of the call center. I run a 500-person call center in my transfer agency business, and I'm measured on, do I pick up the phone in 5 seconds or less? That's my client SLA. And it becomes very difficult with the volume. The only way I can resource that effectively and protect my margin is to apply that robotics and that AI to assisting my call center staff. We've actually even rebranded our call center to contact center because it's about digitizing. It's about taking the data and putting it into a form and an intelligent manner that can alleviate some of the manual work on our agents. What we're doing is we're realizing that we have this just amazing amount of talent with deep subject matter expertise. I mean, we have tenured people anywhere between 5 years to 30 years in the business that know how to do fund accounting and transfer agency the good old way. And now, how do we retool that staff? So it's all around the people, the retooling, the development, and the when I was introduced, I know Bob for quite some time, but when he introduced me to this Reviture product, it was absolutely brilliant, and it solved so many of my issues that I deal with. I have to deal with strategic locations where I'm building my workforce. I have to deal with the talent. I have to deal with the juniorization of my organization because we need graduates coming into Bank of New York Mellon to build the leadership of the future. I need a different set of skills than we did even just 2 to 3 to 5 years ago. I need to build diversity in my organization. I need a recruiting process that lets me really bring people into my organization that want to do this job, that want to be in and know and develop a career. So I have all this 12,000 manual processes. I have these people challenges, and what this offering did is brought those two things together, and allows, through Bob's organization, the recruiting in the location of my choice of fully trained college graduates coming into my organization and teaming them up with 10, 15, 20, 30-year veterans to learn this UiPath technology collectively together and work together. And what you have is the 1 + 1 equals a multiple of that. And all of a sudden you have this young kid coming out of college who's learning from the ground up what accounting is, what fund accounting is, what transfer agency is, together with the 30-year veteran learning how to be an engineer. And it's just absolutely brilliant. And we see not only the people development side, but the payoff is my return on investment. Everything I do, every dollar I spend, I have to have a return on investment. I have to have a payback. I've set a payback of less than 1 year, which we all know is very aggressive. But when you're bringing in this talent and you have the people who are dealing with this work day in, day out, solutioning these things collectively, with an engineering mindset, you quickly can solution some of the issues. I've committed to a 20% reduction of these manual processes that have literally been in existence for years. And I'm pleased to say that we've hit every one of our numbers. We're halfway through the year, where we actually exceeded our reduction of manual processes. So that 12,000 number is outdated and continues to reduce every day. We all know that manual process is the bane of our existence in operations. It's the reason I have 8,000 people. It's the reason I have errors. It's the reason I have a poor client experience. So eliminating those manual processes, job one, the way I see it, and that's why I set such an aggressive target for my team and solutioning it with the talent that I bring in the organization. So it's the practical application of this is I'm solving my people side, managing 8,000, managing to the operations professional of the future and building those people with engineering skills who are going to grow up understanding the business as well as the technology side and the AI side, as well as solving my client experience issue around manual processes and continuing to build scale in this business. I absolutely agree that if I can maintain the 8,000 people, as long as I make them value add, taking a individual out of a manual process, creating a manual report, understanding and remediating our reconciliation differences, if I get them out of that low value work and put them into client experience, responsiveness, quality assurance, I know I'll differentiate myself from my competitors, and that's our modus operandi, and that's exactly what we're doing, what we're achieving. Granted, we're I don't even want to call it a pilot because it's not a pilot. It's the initial stages of a relationship that will continue to grow. And one of the primary ways, and I know Bob will talk about it in a little bit, is how we bring people into this organization, how we train and develop them, and how we give them a career, and build a workforce that's in the location we want and with the right level of diversity that we need.
Okay, excellent. Thank you for sharing all that with us, Paul. So, Bob, tell us a little bit about the solution here that you're delivering to Paul.
Yeah, I mean, this I think Paul encapsulated quite a bit of it in his remarks, but this required a deep solutioning exercise with BNY Mellon, and certainly with UiPath, and so the goal from the outset, and I think Paul laid it out very nicely for us, was I want to move from a operations culture to an engineering culture. How do I get there? So what we've done is we've combined the two. We've combined the hire, train, deploy model, which is the freshers, the registered freshers, and the upskilling model that we talked about, and we've created basically a center of excellence down in Lake Mary, which is a strategic location. Lake Mary is in Orlando. It's a strategic location for Paul and his team. So the folks we recruited, the folks that come from Reviture, they go through a pre-selection process. So Paul and his team had the ability to interview them for cultural fit, interview them in terms of their intellectual curiosity, their engagement, their motivation to be in the asset servicing business at BNY Mellon, and to perform the job. Once they matriculated inside of our training, they went through a rigorous process where we were building foundational skills in UiPath, but at the same time exposing them to the asset servicing business at BNY Mellon, which is important because, as I said, we don't want this to be an academic exercise. We want it to be a practical exercise. We want them to, when they matriculate from this program, we want them to be day one job ready. Parallel with that, we were putting Paul's SMEs, his existing employees, upskilling. We were putting them through a parallel process of creating a citizen developer program, such that they knew quite a bit about UiPath and knew how to target manual processes within the asset servicing business. So as these two teams went through the parallel process, they converged with real-world BNY Mellon projects where they were automating manual processes, such that when they both graduated together, they presented the outcomes. So this wasn't people just going through training. This was people who were going through training in parallel, then converging, working together, and ultimately doing exactly what they need to do to achieve Paul's strategic objectives of continually reducing the manual processes within his org. What's very interesting to me about the solution exercise is that, having worked within banks, Paul and I know each other for 30 years, having worked within banks, the two of us, and many of you on the call may be working for financial institutions, they're highly regulated. So when you say solutioning, that means that we, and Paul did the massive amount of legwork here of aligning all the different constituencies within BNY Mellon to basically allow us to automate these processes during training. So our folks were onboarded during training, and now they had access to BNY Mellon systems, and now they're working on manual processes, on automating those. But that requires a tremendous number of touch points within the firm to make that work. And so this was, I think, one of the most interesting journeys I've ever been on, but the most interesting journey I've been on at Revature, where we brought all of the BNY Mellon forces to bear. We brought UiPath forces to bear. We brought Revature forces to bear, and the triumvirate there created this outcome. So hopefully that gives you, and just to reiterate, what we're really creating here together is a center of excellence in Lake Mary. There are other strategic locations that we're going to focus on as well in the future. Pittsburgh happens to be one, and this is the combination of SMEs from Paul's team and contingent workers from Revature's team that have a 1-year conversion to a 1-year option to convert into a full-time employee. And given the performance I think we've seen so far, and the excitement and the engagement that the Revature folks have within Paul's team, and Paul's culture, I think is amongst the very best I think I've ever seen, of assimilating them and making them feel part of that organization from day one. And so when I think about the contingent workforce and the good works of SIA, I think to myself, how can the contingent workforce function or role be applied more strategically to outcomes here? So at the top of the house, every C-suite has strategic objectives. How can the contingent workforce folks plug themselves into outcomes that ultimately help achieve those objectives? So with that, I'll hand it back to you, Steve. Thanks.
Thanks. I got a quick question for you, and it has to do with, where are you? What's the current status of your journey? And I think you already shared even some of the progress and impact, but how are you measuring success? Can you give us just some ideas of where you are and what you're worrying about?
Yeah, sure. It ties back to building scale in our business, right? Our business continues to grow. We bring on new clients every day. The new clients create new funds every day. One of our most volatile businesses is ETFs, right? We're launching ETFs every day. The ETFs we're launching become more and more complex with loans and Bitcoin, and so you have a high volume, high transactional volume type of business like ETFs, and to scale that type of business and make it a profitable margin, you need to figure out how to deal with this large amount of data that's coming in. And our primary job as a accountant and fund administrator is making sure the data that we've received from all the correspondents, the custodians, the investment banks, the agent banks, reconciles back to that fund. And just think of a fund with hundreds of millions of positions, hundreds of millions of price points, taking the differences and understanding those differences and figuring out which ones are an issue and which ones aren't. We're taking the data of our exceptions and we're analyzing it and auto repairing many or auto closing many of those exceptions down. And it's tremendous the number of, in this, we took just one group of what the people were working on, and that group have been able to reduce the number of exceptions that they have to go research by 36%. And that's like, we really just started this, and it's all a 2023 event that we're talking about. And it's isolated. It's one team that had exceptions that they had to research every day, reduced it by 36%. And that turned into a building scale. It saved like 2 or 3 people. So I've achieved my 1-year payback ROI. So if it costs me, $1 million of investment, I need to create $1 million of scale in 1 year. And when I have an exception, and again, it's time consuming. Just think of there's a corporate action break. The team has to go in and check. Is it even a good exception? Is the data right? Is it a fractional rounding difference? All this used to have to be done manually. And now we've built, and there's there's thousands. And the reason, we do this in the strategic architecture, but even the strategic architecture can't be as agile as the technology that we're using now with UiPath. And it makes it much more controlled by operations professionals. We don't have to rely on going back and, 6 months of analysis, 6 months of requirement writing, 6 months of development. It's putting the control in the operations professionals to do, and I know we'll talk about governance, which is really, really important later on, but it's putting control in the operations professional. What they're doing in their head is now translating. And again, I really like the way Bill said it, which is we're putting it right, that automation right next to our accountants, and it's really helping them do their job. And that's really the important. It's giving them the insight, the intel. There's still, in my business, there's still a lot of judgment that they have to make, but this is getting rid of so much of the noise in all the variables that we have to deal with every day, and allowing them to make a much more efficient and cleaner judgment on when they do have to make judgments on doing their daily job. But that clearing these exceptions every single day, eliminating the manualness that they have to clear those, is really the game that we're tasked with, and I can't be more pleased with the progress of these freshers, these college kids coming in, but then sitting alongside my 20, 30 year fund accountants that know the job, know the business like the back of their hand.
I think the important thing, though, just to interject, the important thing there, though, is that Paul also has folks that are evangelists in his team, right? They are bought in culturally. They are completely aligned. And they've been extraordinarily helpful to our folks, the ones that are joining. So there's a sense of excitement, engagement. They know what they're there to do. They know what the KPIs are. They know what, they have a very good sense of where they fit, right, in the architecture of his business. And I think that can't be ignored, right? Because you have to create, and I think one of the things that's really interesting about this is that the SMEs are just as important as the Revit refreshers, in that they're the ones who know the manual processes. Those are the ones who target. They're like, this is a great manual process. Let's feed it into the engine. Let's create a flywheel here. This one is a great one. Boom. Let's document it. Let's put it to bed. Let's put it through the automation machine. So that the collaboration of those two groups, I think, is far exceeded, I think, our expectations. And we speak to the Revit refreshers continually, and they couldn't be happier. I mean, they are extraordinarily happy to be working.
It sounds like there's a special part of this process that you really have to have, and that's having that integrated education and instruction and development with some of the experts that are in the particular process. In other words, you can't just go out and engage some UiPath skilled contingent workers from the open marketplace. That doesn't, I mean, it'd be good that they had that background, but they got to go through the training component that you've, an upskilling component that you've designed for BNY Mellon. Is that correct?
Yeah, no, I think that's right. I think that, and so, Paul, you always have a choice, right? Life's full of choices. Paul could have gone to a systems integrator. He could have gone to a consulting firm. He could have done a variety of different things. The expense of which would have been, I think, as he alluded earlier, can be pretty significant. But this gave him operational control, and it gave him intellectual property now that he owns in-house at BNY Mellon, and he did it in the location of his choice. I think Bill would probably he would probably agree with me that sometimes, given UiPath's growth trajectory, finding folks in Lake Mary, Florida, that are experienced UiPath developers is pretty difficult to do sometimes, right? So we created that together from scratch.
So I think there's one other thing, maybe if I can hop in. I think there's one other thing too. When you look at the successful automation programs, we often have conversations with clients around, is this an IT program? Is this a business program, right? And what I think you've been able to hear here is that through Revuture's program, they've been able to successfully tie the two together, right? You're taking business folks who understand process the best, upskilling them. You're essentially combining the best of both worlds, because what happens if this is an IT only project? The IT team, unfortunately, maybe doesn't have the insight into process, right? And how maybe it has to be re-architected or re-engineered. And likewise, if you just have a business person without that IT know-how, then they don't maybe have that frame of reference to say, how can we improve this process through tools? So I think it's really important when we look at successful automation programs to see the intersection of both business and IT and how it comes together to achieve the benefits.
And Bill, I have a quick question for you, because I'm thinking, can I go out and be a UiPath software robot developer? I don't have any IT background. I did study a lot of IT services at Gartner Group in another life, but that didn't mean I knew what I was doing. Tell me a little bit about how that works.
Well, UiPath is a very end-to-end platform, right, in terms of the automation tools that it provides. And that encapsulates a couple different development tools, one geared towards professional RPA developers, and then those geared towards those citizen developers who sit within the business and have the desire to learn. The typical persona, or somebody who does success or typically has success with those citizen development tools, is somebody who's comfortable in Excel and just has that analytics sort of background around how can I take a problem and apply some technology to improve it. But UiPath as a platform and as a whole is really always been built around user intuitiveness. So even that professional RPA development tool that we have, we provide all the training, curricula, the academy around it. So if you have the time, the energy, and the motivation, then certainly both of those paths are open for really any sort of persona that you might be today. And I think one other really interesting thing as you think about the maturity and the advent of generative AI is that very soon we're going to see the ability to build automations in natural language, right? Build me a reconciliation automation is going to be how automations are built in the near term, right? When you think about the combination of some of these large language models and how they could apply to the automation development experience. So it's a very interesting time, and I think building automations is only going to become easier as we move forward.
Okay, interesting. Yeah, I was wondering if it's going to be as easy as using MS Excel, but there'll be some complexity to it. But that's going to be interesting. I really am fascinated with distributing this capability down to the front line of the process, those that are in it. It reminds you of some of the Six Sigma education, where the best insight of how to re-engineer processes, those that are on the line, those that are in the process. And that's what it sounds like this solution is enabling, as far as enabling the talent. Paul, you have all these new re-engineered processes that are beginning to pile up and doing good things. How are you tracking, maintaining, and managing them? What's the governance that you're having in place for this?
Thanks, Stephen. And that's such an important part of the program. And operations tends to learn from its mistakes, and we've had people writing macros and creating UDTs at the speed of light over many years. And I had one of my bosses many years ago deemed the STP as straight through problems. And I've always been very sensitive to that. So the governance around how these user tools, this citizen development is happening, needs to be governed, controlled, managed, inventoried. We need to understand the sensitivity of the information going in and coming out. And we've adopted much of the governance that our technology partners have put in place on the change management, and the reviews of what's happening. And that's really important. I mean, our guys are writing things that auto close an exception. We have to make sure that's tried, tested, reviewed. So we put a governance program in to manage that. So every time we develop in UiPath or any of the technologies that we leverage, we make sure we have the guiding principles set forth that our tech professionals have put in place. And we leverage the same protocols. And we have audits against it. We have an embedded control team that tests them, because we don't want to lose control of it. We deem something, bots gone wild, and we have to stay out of that kind of situation. So the governance is as important as all the development and the efficiencies that we're getting, that we get from the program. So it's a great question.
Yeah, and it seems that the next level of enhancement is that integration between these automated processes, which you really can add that another layer of complexity, which is very, very natural. But it sounds like it's a critical thing to really have your arms around, or you might have bots gone wild.
And let me add one more thing. It just popped into my head. The other thing is, we have strategic programs. Let's say we have a strategic reference data program that could take 5 years, right? It's
right.
Big. It's complex. We don't have 5 years to wait before we can deal with that. And that's what this is doing. Maybe 5 years too long of a time, or 2 years. We can't wait that long. We still have to deal with these exceptions. We still have these client deliverables. So we make sure we time box. Okay, we wrote this process, but it's really because we have bad data, underlying data. When is that underlying data going to be fixed strategically? So we make sure we understand what issue we're solving, and we map it back to a strategic fix if there is one, and then we time box it to make sure that the strategic fix actually is delivered, and we can retire the particular process that we've written in operation. So I think that's a really tying this work to the long-term strategic, either data or our strategic platform.
Yep, and I'm thinking also, Paul, that you're growing to have a really energized workforce that's able to sit there and, boy, this is a better way of doing something. And then there is tremendous potential possibility to maybe changing things instead of waiting for this. It's almost a decentralized reengineering compared to the centralized reengineering process.
Yeah, and it's especially acute in accounting, I find, mostly in accounting, because just like our own personal accountants, it's really difficult to change. I had an unfortunate incident. My personal accountant passed away. I'm very complex given the different firms I worked at. And that was the struggle of moving to a new accountant was really, really difficult. And it's the same thing our clients face. And they want the same person to talk to. They know my account. They know me. They understand. So keeping our tenured people engaged, retooled, challenged getting them out of that manual work that they hate to do, focused on value add work. We're lengthening their careers and we're making them more exciting and challenging. And then these freshers coming in, they're young, they want to be part of the process. They're getting immediate gratification because they have these people that are real experts in the business high-fiving them because they just saved them, an hour a day, right? Yeah. In doing a, job that, that's really not value and rewarding. So the model is ideal from my perspective and my workforce.
Yep. So, Bob, what are some of the best practices that one should keep in mind if you're going to take on this kind of solution?
Yeah, I mean, I think that there's a couple of things. One is the solutioning process is really, really important, and we spent a tremendous amount of time, Gantt charts, aligning all the constituents together. Weekly stand-ups to make this work. It was stood up in record time. I mean, quite frankly, when I think back at the complexity of it. But once you've done it once, then as I said, then it becomes a flywheel because we know what we need to do, in successive cohorts. We've got to align the talent with the training curricula for being at Mellon, the SMEs and the Revushur Associates. It's fit for purpose. So there's a lot of detail in that curricula. There's a lot of detail in the journey that these guys are going to follow, and we want to make sure that we're not giving them useless or wasted information. We're giving them information that's going to be absolutely relevant to, as I said, day one job readiness. And then designing projects, that are real world BNY Mellon, projects that we can implement. That's a kind of a core to everything we do at Revushur in terms of our curricula. Everything we do within our curricula on behalf of a client is customized, and the projects are customized such that, we want someone to know exactly what it means to operate within that environment day one. We don't want them to go through a 3-month, assimilation process. It's just that the productivity of that is very, very low. And then, we want to, as I said earlier, the ability to touch all these different constituents and to bring them all to bear. I think, Paul did a fantastic job, and given his seniority and given his stature within the firm and the workforce that he manages, he made it very, very easy for us. And then, as I said, you want to have a practical application here. You want to be able to show Paul and his management team, what's the ROI, and if you can do that on day one, that's a home run. Right, because there's no skepticism, there's no cynicism at that stage of the game, and if you can continue to prove that with a burgeoning center of excellence, you really have knocked the cover off the ball at that stage. The other thing I do want to focus a little bit on is diversity. So this cohort was extraordinarily. It was about 60% diverse, whether or not people of color, Black, Hispanic American, or female. And so not only did we achieve the location strategy, the diversity numbers were very, very good. And they reflect, I think, Revushur's overall, which is, we have about 3 times the national average within our workforce of people of color. And the reason is because the democratization of our recruiting capability. I like to say D&I is it's not an initiative at Revushur. It's actually core to our DNA. It's just who we are. Right. It's not an initiative. It's just a natural output of our process. And we work with a lot of minority communities, a lot of interesting groups like 110.org and Thurgood Marshall College Fund and Spanish in Technology. All those things help feed, that diversity engine. So.
Okay. Excellent. Thank you to our sponsor, Revushur, for being able to bring this topic and this discussion and have Bill and Paul available to be able to go through some of the details of technology, and that's the client requirement. I mean, it's just very rare that we're able to have this kind of discussion. In the appendix, if you download the presentation, which is available, we have the case study summarized here, so you can take a look at that in detail. Thank you very much for spending this hour with us. We appreciate it, and thank you very much to the panel of experts, especially Bill and Paul, in being able to spend your time with us, and of course, Revature and Bob being able to pull this discussion together. It was very, very important for us to have. Thank you.